Hello, everyone, and I hope everyone out there is having a glorious Monday, or as great of a Monday as I guess you can have on a Monday. But we're really excited today for a few different reasons. One, we are going to be sitting down and talking with three really incredible craft distillers here in America. And the reason that we are doing that is because tomorrow we will be having a great American whiskey release. Sorry, I'm getting caught up on my words here. I guess I need a whiskey. But tomorrow we will be releasing some really incredible cask from right here in our own backyard. And it's just a really exciting time for us. And so we're going to be bringing on three really awesome people to kind of chime in on their individual cask and kind of give you a little insight as into what will be released tomorrow. So I know, with the society, it's we're always kind of after the greatest single malts in the world. And we're always out there, scouring the globe to bring the best cask that we can possibly find, back here home to our members here in America. And it's really exciting that, we got to kind of go out and search in our own backyard for really incredible whiskeys that are made right here in the States. And we're really thrilled to be releasing these three really beautiful casks tomorrow. And so today we are going to be tasting through three of them and reviewing them for you all. And you will have a chance to jump online and purchase these tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And so I think I've kind of said enough, and I think it's time to kind of, get this party started, so to speak. And so I'm going to be introducing you to our three really awesome guests today. And we're going to be going through and tasting some of the really awesome whiskeys that we have bottled for you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Phil Brandon, all the way from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Hello. How's it going?
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. I am doing well. Thank you. So you are owner and head distiller of Rocktown in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I am indeed. Yes. Nobody to blame but me.
All right. Well, we're really excited to have you here today. So thank you for taking the time out to join us.
Yeah.
And then we are going to also be joined by Mr. Jeff Kanof in Seattle, Washington.
Hey, Jenna. Hey, everyone.
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Good. And so you are the co-owner of Copperworks in Seattle, Washington.
Indeed. Yeah, I have a couple of partners, so definitely blame them.
Okay. All right. So
unlike Phil,
you're off the hook. All right. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Allen Katz, all the way from Brooklyn, New York.
I'm in Brooklyn.
You're in Brooklyn.
I'm in my daughter's bedroom in Brooklyn.
Hey, all right. Well, thank you for joining us all the way from Brooklyn. And you are head distiller and owner of New York Distilling in Brooklyn, New York.
In Brooklyn, New York.
All right. Well, I know we have some teammates. Some of our team members live out in Brooklyn. So we have a big love for New York. So we're excited to have you here today.
My pleasure.
So I guess we'll kind of say hi to everyone who's here. So we have Brian McCoy, who is, I believe, Jeff, he's been to Copperworks he's
definitely, yeah,
kind of one of our member ambassadors, and he's incredible, and he's out in Seattle. So hello, Brian. We hope you are well and staying safe out there in Seattle. And we have Dave Bell here and Joshua Case from Indiana and Mr. George Kaplan. Thank you so much for joining us today. So this is really exciting for us at the Society because, every day we're talking about, whiskeys from Scotland or from Ireland, or, we're talking about, a lot of single malts from around the world. And it's really exciting to take, today and a Monday of all days to talk about American whiskey and to have the three of you here to chime in on it and kind of give us your thoughts. And it's really exciting. So I thought what we would do is we would drink all of these whiskeys together, if that's okay with you guys.
Love it.
Sure.
Alan's already
Ready
started. I like it. All right.
Yeah.
I'm ready too.
Got two hands.
So I thought it would be fun to go through each of these whiskeys and taste them together, and hopes that you guys can kind of chime in on what it was like to, work with us and about these individual projects. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, let's do it. So I thought we would kind of start out west and work our way east. So Jeff, we're going to have you up first, and I think that's where we're going to start. So
Sounds good. Yeah.
So-
So I mean, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was going to say before we get into drinking this stuff, if you could kind of just tell us, a little bit about Copperworks and where you guys are at and what you've been up to lately.
Yeah, so we've been open for about 7 years. We're in the heart of downtown Seattle. So we're right on the Seattle waterfront. So it's a really awesome location because we get to see people, not only from our own city, but from all over the country and really all over the world, especially with kind of how hot of a tourism market Seattle's been lately. So we kind of knew we wanted to be there because of the history of one of our founders in particular. So one of my partners, Jason Parker, he was the first brewer at Pike Brewing Company. So they're a brewery that's right in the core of downtown Seattle. So he loved that experience being there and getting to meet people. So he knew when he wanted to start this project that we wanted to be in a similar location, somewhere where we could really meet people from all over and have people come in the door, see how we're doing everything, be very transparent. So he and one of my other partners, Micah, they're brewers. So the whole idea behind Copperworks is we start with really high quality malted barley. We do true brewing processes, and then we distill those, essentially unhopped beers into spirits. We do that so much so that we actually partner with a few local breweries. So one of the big ones we partner with is Elysian Brewing, which is here in Seattle as well. So Dick Cantwell, who was one of the founders there, was actually a brewer under Jason at Pike Brewing back in the very, very early 90s. So they've been friends forever. So when it came time to do this project, we said, well, we're going to build, some large distilling equipment. We're going to barrel everything ourselves. We're going to do the fermentation in-house, but can we borrow some of your brewing equipment? Can we come do contract brewing essentially? We'll order the grains. We'll be there kind of making the calls, but we'll use your system. And so it's worked out really great because we have access to these amazing brew houses. Theirs is almost a $10 million brew house.
Wow.
We've also started working with Fremont Brewing, who built a brand new brew house that's $20 to $30 million.
Yeah.
So we were able to invest in the distilling equipment, invest in the visitor experience, but have these partnerships to create this really good quality unhopped beer that goes into our spirits. So getting a little more to the particular whiskey that's in front of us, as brewers, one of the things that you see brewers focusing on a lot these days is hops. Well, we're not using hops, so we have to think about kind of what's the level a distiller would think about, and of course you go straight to the malt. So a lot of the history of whiskey has been using barley as more of a commodity, but we're starting to look at it, and there's a handful of other distilleries around the world that are doing this as well. We're starting to look at the grain more like a grape's looked at in wine. So think about what varietal of barley is it, where was it grown, and even what year was it grown. And we sit in a really cool position here in Washington, in that we have a bunch of different growing regions just in our own state. So, think about France and wine, think about the areas where they grow certain varietals of grapes better than they would grow others. So they focus on that. Well, grain being a little easier to transport, we're able to buy stuff from our side of the state where it's coastal, obviously very wet, famously wet. But the other side of our state, which is about a 5 or 6 hour drive away, is very dry. So it's a totally different growing climate. So the barleys we're going to get from both are going to be very different. So all that is to say that this whiskey in front of you is part of what we call our single variety malt program. So this is where we're picking the varietal malt. We're working with a small farm to grow it on a single plot. We're working with a small maltster in the state of Washington to malt it separately. And then we're brewing it, distilling it, and barreling it completely separately. And then sometimes we'll use it in our normal releases, but other times we'll do single cask releases. Or in the case of this one, we'll do the release with someone else that's going to do a really cool version of release. So this one is called Alba Malt. It was grown in Skagit Valley and malted by Skagit Valley Malting. Skagit Valley is a region just about 70 miles north of us here in Seattle, so about as close as you can get in terms of growing the grains for our products. What we noticed about this particular malt is you get a lot of really nice dark fruit and spice from it, a little more than you would from your typical 2-row barley. By the way, this is a 6-row barley, which is very uncommon for a brewer to use. the cool thing about these projects is, it's a new discovery that's going to take years and years and years. This is our first one that we've ever released, was the Alba. So we did a single cask on our own. This will be the second time, and we've used it in some of our major releases as well. But it's a huge learning curve. With whiskey, it's going to take, in this case, at least 3 years.
Right.
And then we have a lot of it in used barrels, so that's going to, take a lot longer. And that's when you're going to see even more of that malt character coming through is in the used barrels. We anticipate those will be ready 8, 9, 10 years, something like that. So, I'll shut up for a second and let you guys.
No, I think that's great. So this is one of only 2 single cask of this particular varietal.
Correct.
Okay. Wow.
Actually, I lied. This would be 3. We did release it again. We kept one for our tasting room, and we sent one out to distribution. So we kind of did 2 at the same time, and this would be like the second iteration of a release.
Okay, so third time's the charm. So this is the magic cask, the third one. So
love it.
So I'm going to go ahead and kind of introduce what this is. So this is going to be cask 143.1. It's called Sea Buckthorn Tea Time, which is a mouthful, much like all of the addresses in Seattle. I talk with a lot of members in Seattle, and it takes me a while to say the whole address. Like, it's very confusing up there. It's like 1,210 East 540th.
Yeah,
place,
you got to get those directions right.
It's so crazy. So this is a nice mouthful of a name. So this is a 3-year distilled on March 14th, 2016. And this is in a number 2 char barrel, correct?
Correct, yep.
So here she is.
So, one of the keys about our whiskey program is we're really exploring. It's a new category, American single malt. So we didn't want to sit here, open a distillery, and say we know the perfect thing to do. It's going to be this barley, it's going to be this char, it's going to be this entry proof, it's going to be this amount of time in the barrel. We want to explore different possibilities. So we're doing it in the barley, we're doing it in the barrel types, we're doing it into the entry proof that we put them into the barrel. Obviously, the length of time it stays in the barrel. And then, of course, we can combine barrels together in different ways. So one thing you'll notice when you look at our regular releases of whiskey is they're all a bit different because we're kind of exploring and celebrating that.
Yeah, this has, the nose on this is really beautiful. There's like a cherry Coke kind of vibe I'm getting off of this.
Yeah, and a lot of people are surprised, a 3-year whiskey. And a lot of that's because of the brewing process. We're using a real beer yeast. We're putting in something to the still that's a little sweeter, a little less dry. So there's different flavors coming through. It's a lot cleaner as well. So it doesn't take quite as much time to clean up in the barrel as, a traditional like bourbon or rye might.
Right.
A lot of
I agree. You can sort of almost gently chew on that sweetness. It's lovely. It's with limited experience on particularly American single malt. I'm also curious, Jeff, for my sake, frankly, if you touch on your fermentation length, which I was most intrigued about, the length of it. Do you have any control apparatus in the length of it as well?
Yeah, so we're using a brewer's yeast. So typically we're using a fresh yeast from Elysian Brewing, although we've started to experiment with some different yeasts recently. So we're kind of letting it do its thing. We do have temperature control, so it is usually 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's definitely cooler than your typical whiskey fermentation, which is why it's taking quite a bit longer. So yeah, it can go anywhere from 6 days to 2 weeks, depending on the particular batch. And yeah, I mean that's obviously much different than your typical Scotch or especially typical American whiskey fermentation. Yeah. And a completely different yeast than you'd use in any of those products as well.
Yeah. Well, the toasting and the char on the barrel, though, really add to that spice character, I think, for sure.
Yeah, it tastes like gummy bears and whiskey with like you get that spice on that tail end. It comes through and just kind of gives you a little tap on the tongue and. Right. This is really fun. This is a fun whiskey to drink.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things. We're whiskey nerds. but we also like to have fun. So we never want a whiskey to be like so serious that you have to, you can't just enjoy it. So we want it to be the level where it's complicated enough that if you want to sit for 30 minutes and do a tasting, you can, but also just has to be purely delicious, right? Because some people might just want to drink it or put it in a Manhattan or put it in old fashioned. And we always want that to be the case. We don't want it to be so complicated.
Maybe I focus on spice as the rye guy, guilty. But I get all the fruit and the sweetness and a little bit of honey, maybe like peach, apricot. But for me, what's fun is it's sort of like a through line of chicory that just sort of bounces along in that sort of richness. I don't know if it's how you describe it, Jeff, like with chicory or molasses or a darker chocolate that just, it's not over the top, but it's just a nice little gentle pulse that every time, frankly, the alcohol dissipates after I take a breath in, I'm really left with that abundant note, which I like a lot.
Yeah, and I like your little curve that you did, because one thing I find with a lot of our barrels is they're quite sweet, but they're not so sweet. So they kind of have a nice sweet punch, and then they dry out just enough that you're ready for the next thing. Sometimes you have a dram of something and it's just cloying, and so you're like, well, that was tasty, but I don't really want to drink a whole glass of this. I think ours is right there where, you get all that sweetness and then you get that spice at the end to kind of want some more.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that we got from Dave Bell was that he's curious to hear how each of the distillers think that their different unique climates affect barrel aging. So what is that like up there in Seattle?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So most of our whiskey is aged indoor in temperature controlled situations. So it's on site at our distillery. So it's roughly 70 degrees. We do have differing levels of humidity than other areas. I think it certainly has an impact. We don't know the full extent of it. A couple of interesting things we're doing is we have another warehouse that's much less temperature controlled. So we're going to learn about that over the coming years. And we're also doing a project with, I think I can say this, with Independent Stave Company and Balcones, where they're sending their whiskey to different areas. And we'll be able to see kind of the result of how their whiskey ages in our warehouse. And we have them in both of our different warehouses. So we'll be able to see, not only how it is different than Texas, but I think there's, a couple locations around the US, and I think they have one in the UK maybe even as well. So that's going to be fun once that whiskey's of age. So I guess I answered the question by not answering it. It's kind of TBD in many ways. We are temperature controlled. We are temperature controlled, which helps with a nice level of oxidation very quickly, because we have a high average temperature compared to, certain places where, Scotland, for example, where very low, oxidation because the temperature is pretty low almost all the time. Even in the peak of summer, it's not super hot in most of those areas.
Well, yeah, so just to kind of touch base back on this is cask 143.1 C Buckthorn Tea Time. I've never had C Buckthorn tea before. I don't know if you gentlemen have had that in your lifetime, and if you're getting that from this whiskey, I'm not sure.
I've had C Buckthorn. I know what it is, but no, I've not had it as an herbal infusion.
Yes, no, I have not explored that yet.
Yeah, we don't have that in Arkansas.
So again, this is just a brilliant whiskey. It is such a fun whiskey to drink. I don't know how else to really describe it in one word. Other than that, the nose is just. And the viscosity on it has a great mouthfeel to it, and it really clings to your palate. And even after you finished, it just kind of lingers. And this is a lot of fun. So thank you for this.
And I know I'm talking a lot, but that is a really good point. The mouthfeel, I think, is a reason why our whiskeys can often be great as single casks, because they can handle the high strength. Even our standard bottling things, we typically do 50% and above, because it does have so much mouthfeel, it can stand up to it. So, yeah.
And honestly, this doesn't drink like 60% to me.
Right.
And I know I say that all the time. I don't know if it's because my palate is constantly exposed to cask strength spirits, but this drinks really beautifully, and I think that it's so diverse. Like you could use this, like you said, in a cocktail. You can throw this on a cube of ice when it's 100 degrees and humid outside, and I think it's really versatile. And
highball is really nice with the body because
nice
for the
I'm a fan of a highball.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, yeah, thank you for that. And just small mention, you guys were named craft or distillery of the year in 2018, right?
Yeah, the American Distilling Institute, they pick a distillery every year. So we were honored and completely shocked to be chosen in 2018. So we're super proud of that.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome. I've heard great things. I hope to get back up to Seattle soon to come for a visit.
Definitely.
And
let us
snoop
know.
around a little bit. Yes. So, all right. So that is our first of the 3 American whiskeys that we are going to be releasing tomorrow. And so I guess we will take a trip from Seattle down to Little Rock, Arkansas, and we'll get into some bourbon.
All right, let's do it.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're going to cruise on to our bourbon. And so, Phil, before we kind of share what this is, do you want to touch a little bit on what you've been up to in Little Rock and touch a little bit on, who is Phil? Who is Rocktown? Can you kind of fill us in on that?
Sure. So I'm Phil from Rocktown Distillery. I founded the distillery in 2010, so we're a little over 10 years old. We got started because I had a passion for whiskey and got fired from my corporate job and said, screw corporate America, I'm gonna do my own thing and I'm gonna start making whiskey. So luckily here we are still 10 years later doing our thing. I was one of Dave Pickerell's early clients, I guess, and he came to Little Rock and helped me learn how to distill. But just as with any consultant, if you're not paying them, they're not helping you. So after a couple of weeks, he had to move on to another client, and I've been here doing it myself ever since. So we pride ourselves on being from Arkansas and use all locally sourced grains wherever possible. I know a lot of distilleries, craft distilleries, are doing that now. But we use Arkansas corn and Arkansas wheat and other Arkansas grains, as well as malted barley that we source obviously from out of state. But and then we have a cooperage here in Arkansas, so we do use some locally coopered barrels. And so we have been in the whiskey distilling since 2010 and keep on living the dream,
So are you guys only doing bourbon, or are you doing other spirits? Are you?
No, we do a lot of things. So our number one seller is vodka. We also do gin, as well as we do rye whiskey, bourbon whiskey, wheat whiskey, single malt whiskey, and then we do different variants of different grains, of different malts. I've got some cognac casks and some sherry casks here behind me for finishing. So yeah, we've done lots of barrel experiments and different cask experiments, as well as grain experiments and one-off releases on the whiskey side. But we have a nice tasting room and cocktail program, and encourage people to come visit. We're available, in about 12 states, and been in the UK some, and Canada, and the like. So,
And you're the first distillery since Prohibition in the state of Arkansas.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
Because I think, how many distilleries are there in Arkansas?
Now there's probably like 5.
5?
Yeah.
So you're blazing the trail there in Arkansas. Yeah. That's awesome.
Been doing it for a while now here in Arkansas, and the others are considerably younger. I think 2 years old is probably the next one. I'm excited. I've been to Copperworks, and I've been to New York Distilling. So I'm glad to see you
awesome.
guys.
I have to get to Arkansas.
Yeah,
never been.
You owe me one.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a road trip from
Yeah.
all the way to Seattle down to Arkansas, all the way back up to New York. I think that sounds like a fun
Love
little
it.
road trip.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this will be my first whiskey I've ever had from the state of Arkansas. So I'm really excited for this.
Well, okay.
And yeah, so let's kind of get into the whiskey. And
All right.
so this is going to be cask B3.5, and it's called Bacon Jam Session.
All right.
It is a 5-year, and this is in a charred new oak cask, which kind of has to be. And this is at 59.8% ABV. And so do you want to kind of touch a little on so you said that you use a cooperage there local in Arkansas, and then are you sourcing cask for finishing from anywhere else?
So this was distilled in May of 2014, and we actually used a cooperage in southern Missouri called McGinnis.
McGinnis,
so
okay.
This is a cask from McGinnis. As you noted in the number, it's B3.5. So this is our 5th release with the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. So fun to do one that'll actually be available here in the United States and not only in the UK. I had to beg to get a bottle of it back here for my collection of the others. Hopefully I'll get one of these.
Well, I know a guy, so I'll.
You know a guy?
Sure. I know a guy, so I'll be sure. I think he's somewhere here in the chat. So
right.
I'll be sure to touch base with him.
But this was about 5.5 years old. We do not temperature control our barrel storage, so in the summers it's 120 something degrees in the warehouse, maybe 110 down to maybe it might get to 40 in the winter. So back and forth in the warehouse there. So it is a little bit warm in the barrel house I'm in right now. This is we moved a couple of years ago, so this is the new barrel warehouse, but it's a little bit nicer than the old one. But so
well, it looks beautiful, and so I'm going to kind of dig into this. So I'd love to hear all of your notes on this as well. So please feel free to chime in on that.
Yeah, my first thing I got from the nose was very specific and kind of odd. It was Baby Ruth candy bar. I don't know, just kind of nougat and nuts and chocolate. I feel like I only have Baby Ruth near Halloween because I don't think anybody actually buys those except in the fun size. But no, it's super nice nose. I haven't really got into the palate too much.
Alan, we couldn't hear you. Are you on mute?
I said, what is the fun size for chicken on Baby Ruth?
Yeah, this has just a really I'm getting a lot of earth, like a lot of earthy notes on the nose on this.
Right. Yeah.
Like
a lot of dry earthiness, chipotle.
Yeah.
The notes, the aged tobaccos on this.
Definitely aged tobacco. Very vegetal.
Yeah.
Nice,
right.
Like vegan tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now that you've said that, that's like I'm tasting like leather, and it almost smells like a tack room in a barn with tobacco hanging from the ceiling. This really kind of paints a picture.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, I'm going in.
Kevin
Cheers.
Costner walking through with a cowboy hat.
Yeah, there you go.
Trick or treating for his Baby Ruth,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That tastes like a distillery to me. That tastes like I'm inside of a rick house or a warehouse, or this tastes like the place it comes from. It is dusty. There's a dustiness to this that is really beautiful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Like it literally just tastes like a place. Like I'm there with you in that beautiful room. I know.
Right. So it's 82% Arkansas grown corn.
Okay.
9% Arkansas grown soft red winter wheat, and the other 9% is malted barley. We do not add any enzymes to our fermentations. We just add the yeast, and it ferments for 3 days, and then it's double distilled in our solid copper pot still from Vendome Copper and Brass Works. And then our barrel entry proof is 110.
Okay.
We used char number 4 barrels, and then it aged for 5.5 years, came out at 59.8%. So we do have considerable angel share, but our percent alcohol does rise over time. So more water escapes through the barrel pores than alcohol. So,
yeah, this is just a really just earth-driven bourbon. And I love that. I find sometimes in my bourbon journey, I remember when I first started getting into whiskey and I would taste a lot of bourbons and I would just find that they were like kind of too sweet for me. And I'm a sweet freak. Like I could literally eat cake for every meal of the day. But in my whiskey, I really kind of like to find that balance. And this just has a really just beautiful earthiness that, just from start to finish. And it's well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
So when the world kind of reopens and we can kind of get back to some sense of normal life, you are open for tours and all of that good stuff. So anytime anyone's kind of cruising through Little Rock.
We're doing socially distanced tours right now. You can go online and book that. They are by reservation only to keep the crowd size down and be able to space people out accordingly. Do it in a socially distanced manner, and masks are required except when tasting and all that good stuff. But our tours are down from last year, obviously, but we're still able to accommodate, and we get people in from out of town all the time.
Nice. Well, I do have one quick question for you. Michael asked, how does this compare to the Rocktown Double Cask?
Double cask?
Yeah.
We haven't released a double cask.
It's such a limited edition one you don't even know about.
There you go. You didn't even know. The Whiskey Fairies came in there and just bottled that up for you.
Yeah. So sorry. Not sure about the double cask.
All right. Well, one other question. So are you guys reusing your barrels for bourbon? Like, are those kind of a one and done, or do you kind of hang on to those to use for other experiments? Or that was another quick question.
Yeah, that's, one of the advantages of also being a bourbon maker and a single malt maker is we put our malt in our own used bourbon barrels. We also use them for barrel-aged gins, as well as, we do a wheat whiskey that we actually smoke with hickory chips, and we age that in their used bourbon barrels. We do use them for other things. And then we sell them to brewers and they age beer in them. So there you go.
Nice. So lots of life after they've held bourbon.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, if anybody else out there has any other questions, please feel free to type them in and we'll be sure to get those answered for you.
Really tasty. Cheers, though.
Oh,
yeah,
delicious.
This is my first experience with any of the American whiskeys that we've bottled, and it's been such a treat. These have been a lot of fun. So I'm excited to drink some rye.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's kind of touch base on that. So again, just to recap, our last cask was B3.5 Bacon Jam Session, and there she is. And again, these will all be available for members tomorrow at 1:00 Eastern time. So you can make your notes now of what you want to order and jump on and get those ordered tomorrow. So let's move on to New York, the great state of New York, and talk a little bit about rye. So Allen, do you want to kind of touch a little on before I reveal this on New York distilling and what you all have been up to as of late?
Yeah, well, we're in our 9th year, struggling here through COVID, like many people. It is semi-apocalyptic at the moment, and we're having fun. We're doing the best we can as we try and retool on some things. But most importantly for us has been the capacity and pleasure to just keep focused on production. And on the whiskey side of things, rye is the only whiskey we make from our outset. And when we launched in 2011, really 2012 was the first year that we were able to distill whiskey in earnest with the express purpose, I would say, in the most simplistic fashion of creating a new American whiskey that tastes of more than just wood. We wanted to keep things simple for ourselves so that we could, I think, as Jeff has described in his history and Phil has described as well in his history, take points along the way and discover our own whiskey and how it would evolve over time. Some interesting points for us, we do source our rye from the Finger Lakes region. We are very curious. Time will tell if there is such a thing as a micro region that has a unique point of difference. I think there is, but obviously there's so many other interesting factors, specifically aging, barrel size, where it is in a rick house, climate. I mean, Phil and I are probably dealing with a lot more humidity here on the East Coast than Jeff is out in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have any smoke issues at the moment, Those are but significant and serious factors. But from our earliest onset, we wanted a higher profile rye, but not over the top. What's interesting on the mash bill on this specific single barrel is that it's at 72% rye. And that was our starting point. It's unique in that in about year 3 or 6 years ago, we bumped it up a little bit to where all of our mash bills are now 75% rye. And that's for a variety of reasons that maybe I can get into as we converse about it. But this is one of the unique barrels at 7 years old that was mashed at 72% rye. Again, New York State rye, 16% corn and 12% malted barley. And the other is that while this is 7 years old, for our typical blending process, we don't release anything younger than 3 years old, and we're aging exclusively in 53-gallon barrels. And for us, it's just been a game of insistent patience and putting barrels down year after year that has allowed us to just cherry pick for projects like this, specific honey barrels, if you will, and then for other blending purposes, when we get to our flagship, which is called Ragtime Rye, the capacity to really cherry pick high, middle, and low notes that create a discerning profile of what we would consider a contemporary rye that harkens back to some classic American rye notes that may go back as far, I would say, even as early 19th century, mid-19th century styles of American rye whiskey.
I mean, rye has such a rich history, and in just the research that I've done on rye, which has been a fraction of what there actually is, the history of it is pretty big, and it's pretty exciting to kind of dig in and learn about the hows and whys and all of that, and the fact that a lot of people use this for crop cover, so it was just kind of like a cheap way to basically keep your soil fed in a way.
Sure.
That now this is putting out some of the greatest whiskeys we've seen.
Well, it's exciting for us too. It's not by accident that we focus on rye. From my personal background and in working with my two partners, we were really looking forward and backward at the same time. Backward from whence we came, just in the last 20 years of, obviously there was the revitalization of cocktail culture, not just in the United States, but really in a lot of wonderful epicenters around the world, and focused on simple, straightforward American, if you will, classic American cocktails like Manhattans and Old Fashions, etc. But then, putting an original stamp on it. We didn't want to go over the top, as I said, with rye, but we also wanted to explore how far we could reach along the way. Some of the ryes that certainly I grew up with in hospitality for 20 plus years were the stalwarts that just held on as brand names, and most, not in a bad way, they're great whiskeys, but they had been reduced in mash bill to 51, 52% rye. So from a professional standpoint, those of us that had come up, if you will, in hospitality in the 90s, the early aughties, that was our experience. And so to be able to push that envelope and say, well, we didn't know, but we had some assumptions. What can we do by at first looking at a maybe standard inversion of a bourbon mash bill, but looking at some outer reaches of rye expression, and then taking on this barrel that's 7 years plus old and say, wow, it's not just hit you over the head spice. It has a lot of wonderful nuance and softness to it and rolling evolution, even at such an immense proof.
Yes, so I'm going to kind of just reveal the whiskey real quick, and then we can kind of dig in a little more to this. So this is our first release from New York Distilling, which is very exciting.
Yes,
so not only is it our first from New York Distilling, it was our first from Copperworks as well. So this is very exciting for us. So this is cask RW 3.1, big, bold, fruity, and spicy. And
that's what they call me.
Yeah. So this was distilled on the 17th of October in 2012. And this is at 66.9% ABV. I mean, that's...
Go for it.
Yeah, that's a bold one. So when I saw the ABV on that, I was like, oh my goodness, I think this may be the highest one that I have on the shelf.
I mean, I'm tasting it neat now, which frankly is absolutely fine. I would say in a session, I might put one Crescent ice cube on this just to let the exploration go on and see what other evolution there is, what other flavors come out of it. But what's really nice about this, and I would say for all three of these whiskeys, just from my personal taste, is I wouldn't want to personally complicate them too much in a cocktail setting, but I think you could go in slightly different directions with all of them on a Manhattan in particular, or maybe an old-fashioned, depending on, in an old-fashioned, the type of sugar that you use, and I would be sparing with it. And then, of course, whether it's a Manhattan or an old-fashioned, the type of bitter or bitters that you might use as well. But I would also be sparing just because these whiskeys are so interesting and that there is a nice evolution, let alone finish to each of them as well.
Right, yeah.
I think my favorite rye cocktail is an Old Pal.
Great cocktail.
You
get your hands on some Picon.
Yeah, I may have to make an Old Pal with this. This is the nose on this is so. For me, rye. When I first started getting into rye, I would get a lot of like marshmallow note on the nose on a lot of rye whiskeys, and I haven't quite figured out why that is, or why I pick that up so much in rye whiskeys. But this is like it smells almost like a forest. There's like a damp, like woodiness to this that is, man. And there's no burn on the nose for something that's almost 67%. There is no, I can shove my nose in the glass and it doesn't burn. Like there's like an elegance, a very soft elegance that's on the nose on this.
Again, once that alcohol dissipates, I think there's a lot of nice, frankly, diversity of fruit characteristics that come out that's sort of surprising about a higher profile rye. Part of that is likely, based on char. It's a char number 3 across the board. This is an Independence Dave Company barrel as well. But at char number 3, and it's 7 years, and it'd be interesting, perhaps for all of us to compare, but, being on the same vertical line practically with Phil, we're losing about 5% to absorption, and then we lose about 5% a year to angel share evaporation. So, by 7 years, that's a pretty hardy loss, but loss in a good way, because it's really all that headspace that's allowing a lot of nice oxygen interplay to help mature the whiskey and derive some of these flavors.
So was this on your column still or your pot still?
This was on the pot still.
Okay.
100% pot.
The first thing that hits me with this is just how it's nothing like a Kentucky rye whiskey. And, 10 years ago, if I said that, it would have been a negative comment, because craft distilling, being in its infancy, was doing kind of strange things to try to get product out. But when I say it about this, it's in a lovely way. You know, I'm getting sort of like a dry red wine. I'm getting some like fennel on it. And then much later, it got into sort of like maraschino cherry notes. So it's really been a whiskey that's changed a lot for me in this, 5 to 10 minutes that we've been nosing it, tasting it. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's definitely like the fruit explosion comes at the very end. Like up front, you really do there is like a drying like quality to it. And then it's just like surprise. And there's just like a huge like burst of just like fruit. And that cherry note definitely comes through. I'm definitely picking up on that as well. So this is like a roller coaster whiskey.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, it would be a shame to just make a product that ends up tasting like, a Kentucky rye. And, it's same thing with Phil's, bourbon. It's like these products taste nothing like it. And just like we're not trying to make a Scotch, and that's the idea.
I love the way you put that. That's exactly right. What's the point of trying to replicate? Although I admire most of those whiskeys, I really do. But that's the fun of actually making these products. And
that's why we don't replicate, right? Is because we admire them, and so we want people to have those products, but also have something new to explore.
I'd put it another way too. Frankly, opportunistically, there's a lot, at least in our case, maybe for all of us, to learn from those whiskeys. That things that really work well. And to say, well, not what can I do differently, again, in our case, but what can I come around to augment that experience or that feeling or that flavor profile with all those interesting factors, whether it's where our grains come from or barrel size or char or how long we're aging, et cetera. Those are the really fun explorations along the way.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly, what we're doing. We look, we think about being brewers. We think about how the Scots distill. We have Forsyth stills, so we're kind of following that very similarly. And then we think about, using a lot of new oak, sort of the American whiskey experience. So we're kind of cherry picking these amazing traditions and putting them together in a way that creates Copperworks, not something else that's out there.
But as all of you have kind of built these distilleries from, the floor up, isn't that kind of what you do? Is you kind of do research on all of these different elements and you cherry pick what you believe will be best for your individual distilleries? Is that kind of the process?
I think that's ideally what you do. I don't think everybody does that, but I think the good distillers do that.
But, at the same time, while we may think we like this technique and we like this technique and we like this technique, the whiskey makes itself. It's not all just science. There's this art that happens, this magic that over time in the barrel, these interactions happen. And while we can try to control that and develop that and nurture that, at the end of the day, the whiskey has become what it is because of where we are and where it came from and how it was put together. And sometimes you can't control that at all. And you're glad you can't, because the magic that happens in that barrel is way beyond what we could possibly, we're not sitting there trying to go, how do I get peaches in this whiskey? I really want to take some peaches after 7 years. It's like, wow, that happened. Wow, can we replicate that? And let's see what, I really like this, but I don't like what happened here. And maybe it was because of this,
Phil, you don't have a peach style? We have the peach style. We just you forgot to order that
upgrade.
Yeah, you can get that on Amazon.
Forsyth stills, they got those peach styles on them, don't they?
But that's like the true provenance of
yeah, that's a great point. 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It's just you never know what you're gonna get.
But that's why, we as a small distillery have this opportunity to do all these different experiments and try different things, different mash bills, different cooking techniques, different distilling techniques. And, we hope they all turn out, but sometimes they don't. But we learn each time and we develop what we think is best to represent our distilleries. So
I'd put it one other way. I think at all of our scales is we have the capacity to be pretty nimble. And whether it's having a barrel exchange or a guest distiller, there are things that we can pick up and say, oh, it's not hard for us to try and experiment and say, what if I do it this way? Or what if I change something slightly or analyze something a little bit differently? And those things on our end absolutely make a difference, and they inform what we do. It's not that we're changing things and trying to add something new every day, but it creates an environment for us to simply look at our whiskey and say, let's evaluate it, not just linearly, but from different perspectives. And it helps us be more creative, frankly.
Right. Yeah, and on that line, we don't have an incentive to keep things going exactly as how they've always gone. If you're a Scotch distiller, you're doing a great job. You're making awesome products. So why would you all of a sudden wake up one day and say, we're going to flip the switch and do something new? Whereas we all flipped the switch in the last, 12 years or so. So we got to kind of sit down, viewing all that history and say, hey, what should we do going forward to make something different?
Right.
Yeah, I think that is, there's so many people, whose dream is to start a distillery or to, be part of a distillery. And, the fact that all three of you are here and have done it is, it gives, I guess, people out there hope that you can do it. And I think it's really special. And I'm really grateful that you guys took the time to, spend an hour with us and share a little bit of that. So thank you all very much for that.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to ask a few more quick questions, and we'll kind of do a recap on all of these amazing whiskeys that we've enjoyed today. So there was a quick question about your capacities. I got to go back and try and find it. But can you guys kind of touch on that and what you're kind of putting out liter-wise every year?
Who do you want to go first?
Let's start in Arkansas.
Yeah, so we basically distill, 200 proof gallons a week of whiskey. Okay. So that would fill about 4 53-gallon barrels.
Cool. I can go next. Yeah. So right now we're doing about the equivalent of 2.5 barrels a week of whiskey, and then we have our gin and our vodka products as well. Our stills could probably do about 5 barrels a week if we were really pushing and had unlimited cash flow.
Right.
There's the key right there.
We make gin as well, so we're focused on gin and rye whiskey, and rye production is seasonal for us. We've just sort of come through July rye harvest, September corn harvest, and in earnest, October, November is typically when our whiskey distilling season starts. But if it's on our 1,000-liter kettle, it's about 2 barrels a week. If it's on the column, sorry for the kids in the background here. Thank you. If it's on the column, it depends, 10 to 20 barrels a week, 53-gallon barrels.
Awesome. So key point is all very small compared to, a lot of the brands.
Right.
Another way to put it, for us, our sort of stated but unwritten goal has always been to fill 1,000 53-gallon barrels in a year. We've never hit that. I think the most we filled one year was 867. Again, a lot of factors. We were just ready to ramp up whiskey production when there was an American oak barrel shortage, now passed, but a few years ago. And then it really, the other factors depends on the harvests that come in. We work with one rye farmer in particular who we've grown with over nearly a decade over the years, which has been great, but we wait and see what the harvest is and then analyze the rest of the capacity.
Is it true, Alan, that it takes 1 million seeds to plant an acre of rye?
Not to plant.
Or to grow an acre of rye?
What it takes, in our case, is 1 million seeds per acre to have something that's truly viable at our humble scale to then go mash, ferment, and distill. and really fun project that we've had in the works for now a decade plus that we're just now patiently waiting to bring to fruition. We'll probably delay it through the course of this COVID experience. Has been work we've been doing all along with our farmer, Rick Peterson, and with some advisors from Cornell University on some antique varieties of rye, and in particular one that the origins have been traced back to late 18th, early 19th century rye, of all places, grown in Rye, New York, and likely sort of through the ring out into Long Island, or even what we could call the Hamptons area now, which were once upon a time, really integrated farms. And the particular rye variety that was identified was called Horton. And
about that.
Yeah, and the it passed muster, years worth of agricultural testing, et cetera, and ultimately we were gifted 10 seeds. I always equate it to, I worked in restaurants and bars in the day where you get tipped out and you'd get your nightly tips in a little mini manila envelope.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you get your little mini manila envelope, and it has 10 seeds. That's it.
Yeah.
10
We
seeds.
don't want to underestimate your powers of botany.
Right.
Yeah.
10 little seeds.
It was several years of just propagation over and over again to get to a point of viability. And now we have, give or take, 40 to 50 acres under perpetual crop rotation of just this specific variety, Horton. Anyone's welcome to, go to the seed bank and get it. We've just been working on it for 10 years.
Wow.
So we have our oldest barrels of Horton at this point are 5 years old, and we're excited to release it. It just, amidst COVID, seemed to make sense to give its real due and its importance, frankly, in a significant way to another day.
Great.
Whiskey is all about patience. I mean, you really have to just be patient. And I know that's hard sometimes. So to wait that long, or to, try and propagate over all these years, to just have, again, something that's viable, that's patience. So that's kind of a good segue into, I guess, what will be our last question. So someone, Dave asked, what are your thoughts on kind of publicly publishing or being open about your mash bills? Are you guys, worried about, people kind of stealing your ideas? Or, I mean, do you believe that that is just kind of par for course at this kind of stage that we're in? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we publish everything about all our mash bills, so no secrets here. Yeah.
You'll have to get my eyeball and put it in the scanner. No, we actually, if you go to Copperworks.com and you look up our whiskeys and you look at the link that says past releases, you'll see a 5-page PDF spec sheet about every release we've ever done. So we're kind of, we're giving you more information than you actually care to see. You can learn about the brew, the exact barrel numbers, everything about it. So it's a ton of work, but we feel like, hey, take it. If you want to know about it, we're excited that you want to know about it.
Good luck.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like Allen said earlier, there's so many factors that go into the whiskey, and if you want to make Copperworks exact recipe somewhere else, I think that'd be really cool. It would taste different, and
absolutely,
it would. Yeah.
We feel the same way. There's no point. You want to share with people because we don't have any billboards or bus ads or the like. So the way we endear ourselves is by sharing not just the stories, which are fun because we come from different backgrounds,
absolutely,
and different points of energy and why we wanted to do this in the first place. But these are the stories that people can then go share with the people they like to drink with.
Yeah, that's a great point, and
right.
I'm with you. So, all right, so let's kind of recap these last 3 amazing whiskeys. And so the first one was 143.1 C Buckthorn Tea Time. This is a 3-year from amazing Jeff C. L. at Copperworks, and we went down to Little Rock, Arkansas for B3.5 Bacon Jam Session. So thank you very much for that, Phil.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we went to the great state of New York for Big, Bold, Fruity, and Spicy, a whiskey that was named after Allen himself, for the beautiful 7-year rye. And gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come and talk about these whiskeys. This has been such a unique experience for us and such a treat. And I think our members are going to be in for a real treat when they get to pour these in their glasses and really experience, New York, Seattle, and Little Rock in a glass. So Thank you very much. Is there any kind of parting words you want to put out, or anything that you guys are kind of currently working on, or anything you'd like us to know? Please feel free to share with us. And
stay safe and enjoy. Yeah.
I say come visit all of us once things are, back to somewhat normal. We'd love to see you at our distilleries. I'm sure that says for everyone.
I'd go for that. And frankly, those that are interested in pick these bottles up, I certainly would love feedback, what people's thoughts are when they get a chance to taste it as well.
Likewise.
As would we. So thank you again all for joining us, and thank you everyone out there who joined us for this awesome talk and review of these whiskeys. And I will cheers you all, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And cheers. I wish you all a great rest of